Okay, today I've got Michael Sullivan with me. He grew up in Central Ohio. He studied to be an anthropologist before he joined the Army, which he came in the Army. We were on the same tank crew together. So he came in as a 19 kilo, did 2 years in the Army, and then afterwards joined the CIA as a collection management officer and currently teaches IT at one of the high schools here in the greater Cincinnati area. So, Michael, how you been, man? I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, well, so one of the nice things about modern society is that everyone can say that they're just too busy, and that's me too. So I'm modern in that regard, I guess.
Yeah, we had to work a little bit extra to kind of, you know, work around your schedule. You got a lot going on. When you showed me just this week, and you said this is a slow week for you. So,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, you still had a lot going on. So that's good. I mean, I think staying busy is certainly in my case, it's kind of exactly what I need, you know? So let's go back. I met you, I want to say 1997, 98 time frame.
it was right around then.
Yeah. So when you came in, you were kind of an enigma. Most of the guys that came in with your level of education, which at the time you had a master's degree in anthropology,
Yeah,
um, most folks that come into the military with that level of education come in as an officer, but you didn't. You wanted to come in as enlisted. I remember having
yeah.
conversations with you. I believe the recruiters were trying to persuade you to look at the officer route, or somewhere in your past, somebody was trying to get you to do that. And you said, no, I want to be enlisted. Come in, do your 2 years. You didn't want college money. As I
Yeah.
remember, you didn't even want the Army to pay off your loans. You
Well,
cut it.
so at that time, the GI Bill could not be used for graduate degrees,
Okay.
um, and by that point, I didn't really owe a whole lot. Like by the time I got out of the Army on E4 pay, I had paid off all my school loans.
That's
So
fantastic. That's
um,
awesome.
yeah,
I loved having you on the crew. I was so happy that you were on the tank crew because, we would go out to the field for 2 weeks, 30 days or whatever. And I think I was kind of used to more of the blue collar kind of conversations that would happen on the tank,
yeah,
talking about girls, guns, cars, partying. That was kind of those were the main topics. But with you, it was different. We got into some pretty heavy discussions, and that was awesome. That was great. Let's go back. Why did you choose anthropology? Why was that the field that you chose to study at the time?
so the answer to that is kind of squirrely. It doesn't go in a straight line. So I have to start with something that I learned about myself when I was 51 years old. And that is that I'm autistic. I got diagnosed autistic when I was 51. And playing that back to see like how that affected the course of my life, it explains a whole lot. That it's common for people who are neurodivergent, which is to say dyslexic, ADHD, autistic, non-binary in gender identity, that kind of thing. All of those things are neurological structures of the brain, or they're reflective of that. And when you're neurodivergent and an outlier, then you always feel like that your common sense is not common, and that you're always the outsider. You're like an alien kind of visiting Earth. And it is not unusual for neurodivergent people to then study sociology or psychology or anthropology in college. And the first time they take one of those courses, they're like, oh, wow, you're telling me there's a user manual for society? And
Mm.
I can just like study up this stuff, and then I won't be quite so socially awkward and incapable. That sounds great. I would love to have an owner's manual to the world. And that was kind of the way it was for me. I took an anthropology class my freshman year of college, loved it, and just shifted all my gears over to that. And when I got to grad school, the master's in anthropology tends to be the full spectrum of anthropology. So archaeology, biological anthropology or evolution, linguistics, and sociocultural anthropology. But my interest as someone who didn't know how to fit into society was the sociocultural stuff.
Okay.
That the other stuff I did find interesting, but it didn't draw me in the same way. I didn't have the same need for it that I had for the sociocultural stuff. And then moreover, after I completed the master's and started working toward a PhD, my doctoral work was all focused on cognitive anthropology and political anthropology. So cognitive anthropology is just kind of the study of how people construct who they are vis-a-vis the people around them, how they make sense of the universe and the people in it. And then political anthropology is how autonomy is negotiated in a social context, in a cultural context.
Yeah. I miss talking to you. I miss it so much. Wow.
So that's why it made sense for me to highlight that I'm autistic first, and then explain the rest of that because it all kind of flowed from that. And then when I, as someone who, I guess I can just spool on to explain why I enlisted in the Army because that follows on from the anthropology stuff. That when I was in my early 20s, I read Starship Troopers, the Heinlein book. And
we went and saw that together, right? Did we not all go together as a large group of us to see that?
I don't remember.
Maybe it was after you left.
Well, and the part of Starship Troopers that grabbed me wasn't the part that got made in the movie.
Right.
It was the first part of the book where Heinlein is doing some world building, and he's explaining a society in which you have to earn the right to vote.
Okay.
That you don't just automatically get it when you become an adult. You have to do something to deserve it. And the main character...
Military service is one of those routes?
Yeah, that's the route that the main character chooses. And so the story starts off as a story of enfranchisement and responsibility in a civil society. And that really resonated with me. I realized that there just aren't enough public service jobs to require that of everyone before they can vote. That'd be kind of a broken, ridiculous system. But in a fictional environment, when you're reading a story, it's a compelling narrative. And I thought, well, I mean, I can still make that choice for myself, even if I don't think it scales up to a full society. I could do that. And so I always had in the back of my head this knowledge that I wanted to serve somewhere, and I would prefer to serve in a capacity where there's high risk and low reward. And the reason for that is as a voter, like one of the things you vote for is how much risk the poorest in America will take on your behalf. And if I didn't have any skin in that game, who am I to cast a vote about it?
I like it. Yeah.
But I also always knew that I was going to be going to college. And once I got to college, I was like, oh, I'm obviously going to grad school. And so there were no breaks there for me. I just kind of went from high school to college to grad school. And then I was in grad school. I'm like, oh, I'm already in my late 20s. If I'm going to do public service, I should probably get on that. So I convinced my doctoral committee chair to let me scope out a research project that would involve me enlisting in the Army to look at resistance patterns among enlistees. And she was pretty unhappy about that. But there happened to be a professor in the department who was a veteran himself. And I didn't take any of his classes because I didn't particularly like the guy. But but he agreed to serve on my committee because he could see, first of all, that it was an obvious place to do an anthropological study, and two, that the university would rightfully freak out about it. And the concern that the university would have is that once they approve the study, their name, their brand, whatever, is being dragged along with the person who's doing the study. And in this particular case, It's a study. Anthropologists do what's called participant observation, meaning that you enmesh yourself in the cultural environment and you participate in the cultural activities so that you can get a real sense for what it feels like. You embody the culture so that you can then analyze it and break it down. And the problem for a university in having someone do that with an Army enlistment is that one of the deals that you sign off on is that if you're ordered to go kill somebody, you go and you kill that person to the best of your ability. And the university didn't want to be rubber stamping murder or homicide, even if it's justified. Like that made them deeply uncomfortable. And so one of the ways that I was able to convince them is by having that veteran on the committee who is able to point out that most people who put on the uniform never have to, pull a trigger in anger. That really it's mostly a readiness thing. And that if we don't study these groups and these populations, what are we doing? Like, are we saying that there are entire swaths of humanity that anthropology won't ask questions about? So it was really useful to have that guy in the committee, and then it was from there that I just walked down to the recruiter's office in Iowa City and said, "Hey, buddy, I got a good day for you because you don't have to recruit me. You just have to answer some questions, and then we have to work out the timing, and that's it." In fact, the reason why I went armor is he asked me, so what MOS do you want to apply for? And I said, well, what does the Army need? Because like that choice, I assured him I could do what I needed to do no matter what MOS they gave me.
Right.
And therefore, why not? Like, if the Army's giving me all this great data, I'm happy to give them what they need. So he said, well, right now we've got signing bonuses for light vehicle mechanics and tankers, armor crewmen. And immediately, like, I hadn't even considered tanks until he mentioned it. And then I was like, oh, that would be a really interesting anthropological study to like be inside of it. The culture of that would be distinct and unique. Like light vehicle mechanic, maybe the Army culture part of that is not terribly different from the civilian light vehicle mechanic world.
Sure. Right.
So if I really want my study to have meat, the tanker move, that's obvious. So that's what I did then. And I'm delighted that I did. It worked out quite well for me.
It did. And I think you made the right choice for sure. I mean, I'm glad you made that choice because it benefited me. It was great having you around. A few things. Wow. First off, I had no idea that you were autistic. In fact, anything that was quirky about you in any way, shape, or form, I just kind of wrote off in my head as, well, this guy's just spent 8 years in college, right out of high school. And, he's, he'll be all right once he's around us. We'll decompress him. He's fine. But, so no, I never noticed that at all. Also, we were aware you did not hide the fact that you were there kind of working on your doctorate. This is a research study for you. This is what you're doing. You told folks that you were doing that. And it's another thing, touching back on the autism piece, and just kind of that feeling of kind of being an outsider looking in and everything else. I went through that as well, and I think I still kind of struggle with that. And I'm starting to wonder, am I autistic? Because I've always been like the outsider looking in. And it's funny that you say that, and then I'm thinking, I've kind of felt that way my entire life, in a lot of regards, in a lot of situations.
Well, I do suspect that you're neurodivergent. I would start with ADHD as my presumption, because you present that way. Mm-hmm. But honestly, the best way to diagnose is to read up on what kinds of supports people with those diagnoses get. Start providing those supports and play around with like the way you set up your home and your daily workflow. And if you find that your life is easier when you're taking the supports for a specific diagnosis, well, odds are good you got that diagnosis, or you're so close it doesn't matter whether you be diagnosed or not. You're benefiting. So it becomes a shorthand then for you to tell people, oh, by the way, I'm ADHD, or ASD for autism.
Right. I
or
I
whatever.
mentioned it in the last podcast I did. I mentioned going to Princeton, New Jersey for a battery of tests. At the time, I thought I was suffering from TBI.
Right.
Um, and it made sense to me because I was having my short-term memory loss was just it. I had so many different issues, but the one issue that I was really pursuing was the fact that I could not retain anything on the short term at all.
Yeah.
And PTSD was was the major thing that they came back with, but right behind it was ADHD. And
Okay.
they said it was mild, but it was the first time, and I think I was 47
Yeah.
at the time, and it was the first time anybody had ever said, according to these tests that you've done, you do have mild ADHD. And as soon as they said it, I was like, yeah, I kind of think you're right. I believe that, you know? So, and then you're like, yeah, I see it.
Right.
That's, yeah.
I would like to follow up on that a little bit in terms of PTSD. Like on the last podcast that you published, the conversation dealt with how you guys went to professionals who kept presuming that there was a singular event.
Yes.
To identify, and that's a failing of the DSM. That odds are good. The next edition of the DSM is going to have either 2 or 3 different sort of diagnoses for PTSD.
That makes sense.
That one will be PTSD that's caused by a singular traumatic event.
Mm-hmm.
That's the classic textbook version.
Right.
One will be something that they're currently calling complex PTSD or CPTSD. And that's what 80% of people with an autism diagnosis have. I do not. I'm in the 20% who doesn't have that, but 80% do.
Why is that? Why is that?
I'll get there.
Okay.
And then the third is what a lot of soldiers get, which is a combination of the other two. They're just stacked on top of each other. And so it's a ton of work to pull those apart and to work through and process each one. All right. So let's talk a little bit about why that might affect your memory. If I say the word amygdala to you, does that mean anything?
Sure. It's part of my brain, the reptile part of my brain.
Okay. Reptile fight or flight.
Yes.
Right. In the last podcast, you guys talked about that. So it's that part of the brain that triggers fight or flight responses.
Yes.
It's the part of the brain that's related to the amount of cortisol in your blood, which is that sort of chemical that gets you like going. Mm-hmm. And there are studies, at least of kids, traumatized kids, showing that over time, their brain rewires itself. If they're under enough trauma, the amygdala starts getting all kinds of great neural pathways feeding into it. And some of those, many of them, are coming from the hippocampus. And that's a part of the brain that is involved in your memory retention and formation. And so if that's getting eroded in its capabilities, and your fight or flight response is getting amplified, that's when you become hypervigilant. And it becomes this awful cycle, because not only is your fight or flight constantly triggering, dumping cortisol into your blood, but you're not able to take all the inputs around you and properly store them in your memory and sort through them. So it's a double whammy effect, which is why it takes so long and so much work to kind of process through, and why PTSD itself is so sticky and enduring as an issue. It has rewired your brain in very specific ways, and the therapy involves you rewiring it back in a different way, but you can never go back to what you were before.
Right. Complete baseline. Right.
Yeah. You're just trying to map a sustainable path forward with what you got.
Right. And a lot of what the therapy is is managing the change as opposed to reconstructing or trying to get back to what the baseline was. It's more of just managing. This is you now. This is how you deal with you now. And
Well, and I'm assuming that at least some part of it is recognizing warning flags of symptoms
sure.
before a
Yep.
major event.
Sure.
All right. So what's going on there with it? It has to do with what is trauma. If I ask you to define trauma, can you put it into words for me?
Well, I would probably it would probably come out sounding like the first form of PTSD that you described. It would be a singular event, a car accident, something of that nature, or being a small child and watching your wife or your mother being beat up by your father. A single event.
Okay.
That's kind of where I go with it. But I want to hear what you're going to say.
Yeah, well, so that's a very common sort of definition. But the problem is we have this other type of PTSD, the complex PTSD presentation, where there is no really obvious trigger event. That in
Right.
fact, when you look at the history of things that have traumatized the person, it's more low level stuff. But the problem is it's relentless low level stuff.
Yes.
Like when you're in theater in uniform, that entire time, even if you don't actually go to the front, that's a high stress environment. And it's relentless stress because it's there when you are sleeping. It's there when you're awake. Like you don't get
All the
away
time.
from it.
Right.
And even people who are not in fear for their lives in real terms, in obvious terms, existential terms, they can still get PTSD from it. So then we have to redefine our sense of what trauma is. And what I would suggest is that trauma is what you get when your stress levels are overwhelming to you.
Okay.
So whatever capacity you have to process and deal with stress, if that becomes completely overwashed and you don't have anything left to deal with the stress, that extra stress becomes traumatic to you.
Why do you think that some people are more susceptible to, say, a year-long deployment with that constant stress, whilst others are not? Others go there and they come back and they're fine, and did the same exact job as what I did, for instance, and they come back and never have any issues.
Yeah, you know how people say that there are only a couple things you can change, and one of them is your attitude.
Yes.
And the way we change our attitude is we reframe the situation. So if we find ourselves getting really angry at a person that we don't know, a total stranger who's just like done something rude in front of us, that one of the things we can do to manage our anger is we can reframe it with the idea that that person is dealing with demons I don't know about.
Yes.
And then suddenly we have sympathy for the stranger.
Yes.
And that sympathy allows us to process the stress of our anger.
Yes. I use that tool a lot.
Okay. All right. So reframing in this sense is something that we have to kind of build habits for. And in one of your previous podcasts, you had a guest who defined himself as a warrior culturally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then said that he did not feel burdened by PTSD from being in ugly situations. And I would suggest that he probably was, but very differently from other people. That he would look at what other people are experiencing and he'd say, well, that's not what I'm experiencing at all. So what I have is not PTSD. It might be something else.
Right.
And the way we frame it can help us process the stress that's coming in at us, so we can kind of triage it a little bit, and you can silo things off. I think it's harder for an ADHDer to silo things off like that, because one of the hallmarks of the ADHD brain is that it has a lot of receptors to pull in simultaneous inputs. And in fact, you might find that sometimes if you're not adequately stimulated,
Yes.
that you get fidgety
Yeah, big time.
Um, and that's an ADHD thing.
Hmm.
It's not an attention problem. It's the fact that you've got a brain that's trying to maintain a flow. And if you're juggling, you need multiple things to juggle. If you're only juggling one thing, you're liable to drop it because you're not flowing in a juggling flow. And the ADHD brain needs to have multiple things to juggle. Otherwise, the other hand doesn't know what the hell it's doing. And so it starts like making up things to do, and eventually it knocks into the first hand that drops the ball.
That makes so much sense. There's been so many times where at the time I'm like, oh my God, I've got so much going on. But in a way, I was kind of like in a zen, kind of like I've got 5 tasks. I've got people talking to me. I've got all this going on and I'm handling it. I'm knocking shit out. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh, this is too much. But at the same time, I'm in a flow. I'm a zen. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. This is all right.
So some soldiers or other people who are experiencing traumatic levels of stress, they have ways of framing it so that it's just part of flow for them.
That makes a ton of sense.
And the longer they can sustain that flow state, the less traumatic the stress is for them.
Yeah. Yeah, because the guy you're referring to is Joey, and he was who I was talking about also. Like, how can some of us go there and be jacked up and others are just fine? And he was exactly who I was thinking of. And what you assessed is the same thing that I had assessed is, he framed it completely differently. This is what I was meant to do. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And he embraced it and probably enjoyed the hell out of every damn minute he was there, Whereas I feel like I was analyzing the what, where, when, why, how for every single thing. First off, I didn't think we should be there in the first place. I was like, this war is bullshit.
Yeah.
Why are we here and people are dying? And I was taken in. I was taken in so much, and I was allowing all of it to stress me out, and not just the missions themselves, just everything that was going on from the president all the way down. And I haven't told many people this, but while I was in Iraq, I was sending letters to Geraldo Rivera, to NBC, to ABC, to Fox News. I was sending letters because, for one, I was stop lost. I was supposed to be out of, I was supposed to be out of the army, and they made me stay in and go to Iraq. And I was not happy about that. I was not happy about the war. I was not happy about our mission set of just drive around and get blown up with no clear reason why. And I was so frustrated. And after we lost a couple guys, I'm like, I'm writing letters. Nobody responded to me. but I was only a staff sergeant in the Army, and I was like trying to take it all on. And it was a lot of stress. And it makes sense now. I think I don't know if the ADHD diagnosis would have helped me getting that 30 years prior to when I actually did, but I think it would have helped me understand things and maybe put into place some control measures like you referred to earlier to make it a little bit more manageable. I think
and my assumption is that the Army and the military in general, but the Army is what we have experience with. So let's talk about that the Army is disproportionately made up of neurodivergent people. And I'll tell 100%. You why.
100%.
My working theory on this is that if you've got a kid growing up in school and they're just neurodivergent, they're going to get dysregulated more often than other kids by that environment because the environment wasn't built for them.
Right.
And the more divergent you are neurologically from that structure, the more stressful it is, the more likely you are to become dysregulated. When you're dysregulated, you act out. You don't comply with expectations. And unfortunately, especially with ADHD, that a lot of these kids get put into special ed and they're told that they're dumb, or maybe you'd learn something if you weren't so squirrely. And so they get in their head, oh, I'm not college bound, or if I go to college, I'll be scraping the bottom of it. I don't really belong there. Right. I should probably go to trade school. Mm-hmm. And some of these guys end up just going into the military because it's a more stable option.
Right.
That one of the things that's common if you're neurodivergent is that you're slower to develop those executive functions of time management, tracking all your bills and paying them on time, and making sure that you get all your stuff done at home so you can show up to work on time, and that you don't overburden yourself with other stuff and you don't burn out. Like all that stuff, it's hard for everybody, but for neurodivergent young people especially, it's common for just their world to crumble on them because they're constantly having to hold it together.
Yes.
Because their world is constantly getting knocked apart by the neurotypical world that is just that's the mainstream, right? And I think a bunch of those kids end up going into the military because they feel they can't quite get it working for them in the civilian world, and the Army promises them structure, and it promises
Yes.
them, if you just show up here, we'll tell you what to do and when. You don't have to figure those things out.
Right. Yeah,
Uh,
and I think that's why guys like me thrived in that
mm,
environment, and just took off, hit the ground running. It's like, yeah, I feel comfortable here. And you're right. I mean, just about everybody I knew that I became fast friends with were just like me,
yeah, yeah.
and yeah, it makes a ton of sense.
Well,
Wow.
yeah. The first wake up I had was, I showed up to basic training, OSUT, whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
and unsurprisingly, I was the only guy with a master's degree in the unit.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe
but
the captain, if you ever met him, maybe.
right, right. But it's not like I was any smarter than the other guys there. I mean, there was the full gamut. There's some real knuckleheads in there too.
Sure.
But it was it went everywhere from just these phenomenal thinkers to really struggling thinkers, and that the fact that none of those other guys in that unit thought of themselves as college material, even though I'm like, no, I've seen people get PhDs who are dumber than you.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so structurally, there's something not quite meshing. Um, and I think all too many veterans give themselves a short straw in terms of their self-evaluation.
I agree with you 100%. I certainly did it to myself. Um, and I think it took attending and passing multiple levels of schooling inside the military before I finally figured out, wait a second, I was a CD student in high school, but I didn't put any effort forward at all.
Hmm.
I mean, you're lucky if I turned my homework in.
Yeah.
And and then once I was put in front of material that I was actually interested in and wanted to know, I excelled. And when I finally went back and got a bachelor's, got a master's, my master's, I finished with a 3.875 GPA. And it wasn't easy, but I was interested in it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it and I was able to focus on it. Now I was still challenged by memory issues.
Yep.
I I had to read and write at the same time. I couldn't read the night before and then type the next day. I just couldn't get past that. But that was my workaround. I
Yep.
just do it all at the same time and I was fine. I was okay.
That resourcefulness, by the way, is yet another sign that soldiers are perfectly intelligent.
Right.
I mean, while in your last podcast, you guys were talking about how completely stupid some of the decisions were in country that using white lights instead of
Right. Right.
like driving around like you were at home.
Yeah.
Like there are going to be boneheaded moments, but the resourcefulness that people show, like idiots aren't resourceful.
True.
That's not an educating thing. You can't teach someone to be resourceful. They just have to like build that skill, that capacity in their own head. And I think the more sort of economically impoverished a person is growing up, the more robust their resourcefulness skills tend to be,
Yeah.
if they survive it.
Right.
Um,
I think with some exceptions, the majority of guys that I met in the military that just seemed to handle the austere environments and the challenges and the stress the best were guys that came from uh, lower, poorer backgrounds, more challenging childhoods. Um, they tend to thrive. They tend to do really, really well. And the folks that kind of grew up a little differently, they struggled a little bit. I mean, they were still
Yeah.
okay, but they you could tell they were struggling. You could tell they were so far out of their comfort zone that they're having a real hard time, you know? So yeah, and that's good. And it's nice. I mean, already what you've said so far in this podcast is going to be helpful to so many people. How did you, now I've always known, even when I met you when we were both 27, I knew you were something different. Like the way you retain knowledge and the way you speak so eloquently, I've always been amazed by that. And I want to tell you right now, I was thinking about this before we sat down together. I think one of the major reasons why I decided to go back, get a bachelor's, get a master's and all that was because of you. I was so impressed with you back in the day. Um, at, you know, I don't want to come out and say jealous, but I was kind of like, wow, man, this guy's really got his shit together, you know? And now you're saying, well, I'm autistic. I'm like, I never saw that. I never saw that at all. So how did you become so well versed in the matters of the mind that we've been talking about so far? Is that from your anthropology degree? Is it from your own personal struggles? And where's that all come from?
Yeah, I think anyone who has real depth of understanding in an area, it's because they found that area hard in some way. Like it caused problems for them. So
Okay.
for me, just having really weak social skills all my life to the present day means that I'm motivated. Like when I'm reading something that's giving me some new insight into why something is hard for me, like I'll read through to the end of that because it has real value to me. Whereas someone else might get to it and they're like, yeah, whatever, and flip on
Right.
to the next thing. And then the other aspect of it, um, if I say hyper focused, does that mean anything to you specifically? Like it's not a casual term; it's a specific term.
Well, I have an idea of what hyper focused would mean, and I think I've only been able to hit a state of hyper focus a couple of times in my life. I don't think I've ever really truly been able to, and it frustrates me. I'll give you an example. I don't know if I was still playing guitar when you were around, but I had kind of put guitar down for
Okay.
almost my entire military career.
Yeah.
And I just picked it up again a couple of years ago. And I've been forcing myself into styles of play and guitarists that I thought were unattainable for me to even to duplicate their songs note for note. And I've really been trying to put myself in a state of hyper focus on learning some of these songs. And it frustrates me that, and I guess it's the ADHD, that if it doesn't come to me quickly, I still want to put it down like I used to. And it's
Sure.
like I keep trying to no, come on, man. Maybe put it down for 5 minutes, but come back to it. You know, I can do this. Just so I don't know. Hyper focus to me would mean like blocking everything else out and just intently working on a very specific task. Is that where you're heading or no?
Well, so that would be an example of hyperfocus for sure. But when I use the term with specifically ADHDers, it refers to a mental state that ADHDers can fall into that most other people just can't.
Okay.
And hyperfocus is when you become so engrossed in whatever it is you're thinking about or doing that you lose something called interoception.
Okay.
Interoception is your perception of your body as a body. So are you thirsty? Are you tired? Are you hungry? Has 5 minutes passed by? Has 20 minutes passed by? Do you have to go to the bathroom? Like all these things are normal biorhythms that we rely on interoception to track passively. So that you know when you're hungry and it's time to go eat, right? That kind of thing.
Sure.
An ADHDer, it's not that they have a deficit of attention. That's kind of a misnomer from back when we misunderstood ADHD.
Okay.
It's that they have this wild scale of focus. that has like the polar ends of it are beyond the normal spectrum. And at one end, they're just not able to track a conversation because they're just zinging too much. And at the other end, they're so hyper focused on what they're doing, whether it's like playing guitar or just noodling around, playing a video game, that they lose track of their body's needs and their body's messages.
Mm-hmm.
And someone has to come back. Like they have to set an alarm for themselves to say, oh, you spent too long at this. It's time to move on to something else. Like you don't want to be late for your dentist appointment or whatever.
Okay. That definitely makes more sense. Yeah.
Okay. So that's hyper focus.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the most common way for ADHDers to self-medicate is caffeine. Okay, there you go. So that's actual medicine to an ADHDer. You may find that it doesn't disrupt your sleep as badly as it does other people.
I can drink it right up until bedtime.
Yeah. And it's not doing any favors to your sleep, your quality of sleep, but because it's medicinal for your brain.
I had no idea.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
It's not having the same sorts of wild other effects on you that it would. Like for me, caffeine wrecks me.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people tell me that, and I'm like, I get nothing from it. It keeps me from getting a headache. Is typically what I say to people,
well,
and it's kind of.
I would say it's doing more than that for you. That it's allowing your other neurochemistry to kind of do what it wants to do.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Good.
it's fuel for your brain.
Good, because I was thinking about taking a look at my coffee intake, but nah, I'm going to put that on the. Thanks, man.
Well, yeah, but I think something that your own journey in your 12-step program would tell you is that it's better not to self-medicate.
Yeah, don't tell me that booze is good for me because that'll be. Don't tell me that.
Yeah, no, that's straight up cancer juice. I love it, and I still drink it, but I won't defend it.
You never had a problem with it. I mean, we partied together many, many times, but I don't think I ever saw you drunk.
No, I've only gotten drunk once in my life.
Yeah, I was going to say, and we would throw down around you.
Yeah. And that also has to do with my autism. I hate having my senses messed with. Okay. And you get enough alcohol in you, and suddenly the world starts getting woozy. Mm-hmm. That's not cool to me.
Yeah, and it's funny. I've known several people that are like that. They don't like to drink because they don't like to feel out of control. They don't like to feel the way I wanted to feel. You know, I'm like, well, that's exactly why we do it. And they're like, nah, not for me. I'm like,
hard pass.
It makes no sense to me. But yeah, that's hilarious. Let's go back to so when you got out of the military, I'm assuming you went back and finished your PhD.
No, that's an excellent assumption.
Okay.
So after I got out, I moved to Baltimore, Maryland, and stayed with a friend who had recently gotten divorced, and so he had an empty house.
Okay.
And I moved in. He let me just kind of stay there for free, and I worked on my dissertation. And then my mother passed away from cancer. So I just packed everything up and I moved back to Ohio to help my father kind of deal with being a widower. And I continued to work on the dissertation. And then at one point, my father and I flew out to California to visit my sister, my younger sister, who was an accountant out there in Silicon Valley. And while we were at her place, 9/11 happened. And that really transformed the way I looked at future careers. That up until that point, most of my job applications were for academic positions. By the way, when you start getting toward the end, when you're in like the last 6 months of a dissertation write-up, that's when you start applying for jobs.
Okay.
You don't wait till you have the PhD. You start applying before then. And I applied to dozens of them. And these positions were not well-paying positions. Like the lowest, it was a full-time, non-tenure track, 1-year position, I think at the University of Colorado that paid $27,000 for a year for someone with a PhD.
Wow.
Yeah.
Granted, we're talking 24 years ago, but still, that is really low.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it was barely above minimum wage. And the reality is that the wages were low like that because they were getting between 300 and 500 applicants for every job opening in anthropology.
Okay.
Because universities are just like, they're mills for these degree programs, that you might have a dozen or more anthro professors on campus, and they get all kinds of students excited about anthropology who then pursue degrees without aligning that with societal need.
Yes.
The society doesn't need that heavy flow of anthropologists like being dumped into the economy like that.
Right.
So I was unnecessary chaff, and while I was applying for those jobs, the guy that had hosted me at his place, he and I had been childhood friends, and his father was an FBI special agent. And so I always had this sort of reverence for the Bureau. And my buddy said, "Hey, you keep talking about these various university positions you're applying to, but you should be applying to government jobs too. There are tons of government jobs where they're not going to care that your degree's in anthropology per se, but you've got degrees and therefore you can write reports, and that's useful to them. So just as a fallback, you should apply to government jobs." And I did see one job in the Department of Agriculture that was specific to anthropology, and I applied for it. It was a wackadoo job up in Alaska, just going from little settlement to little settlement, tracking fisheries.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh, yeah, I could totally do that.
That actually sounds interesting.
Yeah, I applied for it. Did not hear back from them, though. I guess they got enough other anthropologists looking for the work that they did not need to get back to me. And the other government job I applied to was a CIA's collection management officer. And it's because when I read that job description, the job description itself included things like must have a sense of humor, must love consuming information. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like a fun job that actually plays to things I enjoy doing.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, I'll apply to that. So it was just one job application among dozens. And they actually got back to me and they said, hey, we've got some questions. We're going to run you through a phone interview here just for 15 minutes real quickly. And they just kind of grilled you on your awareness of global politics.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of that, they have to write that up, and then they make a determination about whether or not you should move forward to the next thing. And if you do, then they call you and they say, hey, by the way, we've got an information session in your area. You are invited to it. And then you go to that, and there's a longer interview the next day after that info session.
Okay.
And each stage, they're evaluating you to see if you make the cut to go to the next step. And I had gotten through that entire process. It's a really lengthy process.
How long was it? Start to finish?
Start to finish for me, it was 10 months maybe.
Wow. Okay.
Because when you get toward the end stage, they fly you out to DC, and that's where you have to do the polygraph, and you take a psychological battery, and you take an IQ test, and you get interviewed by a psychologist, and like it's a 3-day intensive battery of assessments. And if you survive all that, then the next step is the background check.
Okay.
So I was already in the background check stage of things when I was out in California and 9/11 happened.
Okay.
And when I got home, this is before the day of cell phones. So I got home, and the answering machine was just clogged. And there were like 27 messages from the FBI wanting to know if I was in New York because they couldn't find me. They couldn't get hold of me.
Oh, wow.
And I imagine some applicants might have died. I certainly did not. I was just stuck in California for a couple of weeks because the airports were all closed.
Uh-huh.
And that was kind of a bit of a wake up call that this job application was different from other job applications. And
they're already treating you like you were one of them, checking on you. And
well, but it's important to note that this was the FBI doing that, and it wasn't like an FBI special agent. What the FBI does is they hire contractors to do background investigation,
to do the background check. Sure.
Yeah. So I have no clue what the actual skill set was of this person, or how they thought of themselves, if they thought of themselves as FBI or if they thought of themselves as a contract worker. I don't know.
Okay, so it was that person that was reaching out to you.
Yes, it was that person on behalf of the FBI. Yeah.
Got you. Okay.
And I just kept cranking away on my dissertation. I was wrapping up my third draft, and that's when I got a call. I was actually in Alabama at that time because my father had moved down to Alabama. I helped him relocate to Gulf Shores because he bought a house on the golf course there. And all right, that's a nice retirement for you. But
good for him.
Yeah, let's make this work. So I was just continuing to write up my dissertation, and I'd been there for 2 days. My phone rings, and it's the CIA, and they're like, this was on a Friday. They said, "Can you start Monday?" I'm like this coming Monday? They're like, yes, this coming Monday. I said, physically where? And they said, well, in Langley, Virginia. Can you be in Langley, Virginia on Monday? I'm like, I will find a way.
Wow. That is awesome.
I just, I hung up the phone, packed up my car, let my dad know, sorry, Dad, you're kind of on your own now.
You good? I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Langley is where you do your training. Say again, your job description is collection
management officer.
Collection management officer.
Yeah.
So what is that job title? What is that job duty description? And then talk to me about the train up for that.
Okay. Let's break down the officer part first, just because there's a great risk that people listening to this might misunderstand that. It's not a rank. You could just put person in there, and it translates just perfectly well, whether it says officer or person. Inside the agency, they're very specific to differentiate between officers and agents.
Okay.
That, in the public culture, we were secret agents, but agents are the people you recruit. You're the officer. You're recruiting a foreign agent.
Gotcha.
Because they are an agent of our agenda.
Okay.
They're not like a staff employee. A staff employee could be an officer because I'm officially doing this work. They are not. Yeah. So that's the officer part. The collection management part, got to disambiguate management. I was not managing people. It's not a managerial position. You're managing information. You're managing collection. Collection always refers to data, to information that you're collecting in the field. And a collection management officer, in retrospect, I would say at least half of the collection management officers I knew presented autistically.
No kidding.
I suspect that over half of them would be diagnosable as autistic. And
it's fascinating.
It's in large part, if you talk to someone and they seem like total bookworms and they just never get tired of reading and consuming stuff in text, that's weird. that people go on to become professors. That's also weird. Like normal people don't do that. And a lot of these degrees, like they're so narrow. Like
Yeah.
you're not a professor of antiquities. It's antiquities of a certain era in a certain part of the world.
Right.
And to be that motivated by such a narrow piece of like stuff, that is autistic as hell. Like, normal people are just not going to find that interesting or worthwhile. They're going to
Right.
say, no.
Yeah.
I've had enough. Yeah. So that's the way that kind of thing works. And if you're going to be a CMO, a collection management officer, you kind of have to be weird in that way, where you just want to constantly read.
In that 10-month period while they were recruiting you and assessing you, that those are exactly the kind of qualities that they were looking for the whole time?
Not consciously, because I actually did some of that recruiting work on the back end. At the end of my time with the agency, I worked as a recruiter. Okay. And what they're looking for. So for every, at least at the time I was working as a recruiter, for every, was it 1,000 applicants, they took 2 people?
Wow.
It was something like that. And it's not, they weren't taking the 2 like smartest, like best people. That's not what they're looking for. The like best performers, most of those just get rejection letters.
Okay.
Because that's not helpful to the CIA. What they want is a very peculiar combination of traits. One is you have to be academically competent. So you should have at least a 3.0 GPA in college.
Okay.
They're not interested in people who don't yet have degrees. You got to demonstrate that you can actually master content and write it up coherently and communicate it formally. These are all things that any college degree should kind of check that box.
Yes.
And theoretically, everyone who, like the 1,000 number I gave you, all of those people should have checked that box. They should all be competent thinkers. Then the question is, what separates out those that get hired from those that don't? And it's a combination of things. So if you're a visibly anxious person, that's probably going to get you eliminated. If you have an unmanaged substance abuse disorder or personality disorder, like they'll hire people who have problems if you can demonstrate you are managing those problems.
Okay.
Like if you don't have a history of going off your meds,
right,
and then just like regressing in ugly ways, then like, okay, you're in control of whatever you got going on. We'll take you on. Also, if they discover that you're embarrassed or ashamed of something that you've done in your life, they're probably going to pass on you.
Really?
That if you have secrets, personal secrets, that's a point of vulnerability that can be used against you to blackmail you.
Right. That makes sense.
And that's going to eliminate a lot of people because normal people feel shame. Like we've all done things that are kind of humiliating and embarrassing.
And this is the kind of stuff that would come up in the psychological battery?
Yes. Yeah. And in the polygraph as well. Now,
what is it specifically about shame that is a disqualifier?
It's if it's profound shame. So it's not like they're not looking for sociopaths, people who feel no shame.
Right.
They're looking for people who can manage the shame they have. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I had some really bizarre fetishes. Maybe I would be totally embarrassed about them. And worse yet, maybe some of them are even illegal. Like
Okay.
a lot of fetishes can be illegal.
Sure.
And so like you tamp that down, you cover it up, right? You don't show up to your first interview and say, by the way, I've got this really hinky kinkiness you should probably know about because, whatever. Yeah. So that gets covered up. And then during your polygraph, when they're just kind of pushing around, they'll ask you some innocuous questions that kind of get in that general area. And if you start spiking tension on your readout, then they're like, oh, we should follow up on this.
Okay.
And they'll just keep digging a little bit deeper. And there are hard limits to what they can and cannot ask. But if they are able to reveal that you have some secrets that you are deeply ashamed of, that you either judge yourself for them, or you are convinced that other people people you love and trust would judge you, and you would lose their love and trust.
Okay, so this is another point of vulnerability that could be exploited.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So sometimes they'll go off the rails, and if they have a specific, like if you've got a recruiter who's bigoted in a specific way, you could get cut just because you are a woman or are gay or whatever they don't like about you, because recruiters are humans too. And, the organization officially places huge value on diversity, because if you don't have people who can look every possible way and do every possible thing, then you cannot collect information in all possible locations.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. So if you ever met someone, you're like, ooh, that person, they'd be a really good spy. Odds are good they would not. Like they might be really competent and capable, but if everyone they meet is like, they would be a really good spy, they're never going to be able to fly under the radar.
Yeah. I've only met a few CIA guys, but the ones I met were much less Jason Bourne and much more Michael Sullivan, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So your train up is in Langley.
Well, that's where the job is. The job is in Langley. Some of the training is there. There's also a different facility that people colloquially call the farm.
Yes.
Which is government property that they've mocked up parts of it so that, this part you'll actually really get a kick out of, that you spend 6 months in a LARP, a live action role-playing game, for 6 straight months. And your ability to LARP effectively determines whether or not you keep your job at the end of it.
No kidding.
And to that end, during the recruitment process,
you and I could totally do that.
Yeah, no doubt. During the recruiting process, there's a ton of role playing that you have to do, where they give you your character, they set the scene, and then go, and you have to like role play your way through it.
Too easy.
Yeah, I definitely think that D&D players, tabletop role players, had a real advantage getting hired in the first place by the agency and then doing well at the farm.
Oh yeah.
So
That's cool.
The way the farm is truly gamified education. That what they've done is they got analysts to invent a geopolitical reality that is kind of a riff off of what we currently have.
Mm-hmm.
And then they made a microcosm out of like a cluster of fictional islands. And each, like there are different polities that have political figures that matter and movers and shakers and agendas in competition with each other. And as a student, you're given espionage tasks that you have to perform to advance the U.S. interests against these other players.
Okay.
And you spend those 6 months just kind of living that fictional life in that fictional reality, and it makes the learning both sticky and enjoyable.
That's interesting. I had no idea. I'd never heard that before.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like the way the Army says, train as you fight.
Sure.
And what you and McGee were saying at the last podcast you released about how every dumb thing that you witnessed was when training failed to be as we fight.
Right. Yeah, like digging a foxhole in front of a tank.
Yeah. And so with the agency, I guess they also want to train as they fight. And a lot of people in the agency are former military. And when I went through my counterterrorism training, I was paired up with a Navy SEAL, just because most of the people that go into the agency don't have firearms training.
Right.
And how like in the Army, whether you're qualifying with a pistol or the rifle, it's pretty straightforward stuff. Like you don't need a lot of skill to pass that test.
No, not at the basic level. No.
Right. And the CIA is kind of the same way, that it might be a little bit harder, but not by much. And I used to teach marksmanship out in Iowa, and I used to compete. So like for me, shooting was a very comfortable act. And after our first day of shooting, they just kind of sorted us into groups, and I got lumped in with the SEALs and the Marines, just because we were the only folks who knew how to hit the 9 dot on the target.
Right.
So, I that whole process, there's these steep learning curves, but because you're having fun while you're doing it, it helps you manage the stress, because the stress is astronomical.
I believe it.
There's a midterm exam that you take that is 5 days long. And then the final exam is 2 weeks. 2 weeks long. And during those 2 weeks of the final exam, I slept an average of 3.5 hours per night.
Wow.
For 2 weeks.
What does that look like? What kind of things are you doing in that 2-week period?
All right. So in the same sense that they've created this fictional world that you're inhabiting, they've recreated parts of that world on the government property. So buildings and landscape and whatnot. So there's some stuff that you can do there. But most of it, you're role playing outside, off post, in the civilian environment. Just so they have actual, like, real context. That if you start acting weird out there, a cop is going to grab you.
Right.
Right. So you have to be subtle, but you still have to do the stuff. So it was just a good way of teaching people not to be flamboyant with these techniques that you're learning.
Can you talk about any of the techniques, or like one
No,
example?
I can't, but because sources and methods are the two things that you're never allowed to divulge. But what I can say is that a lot of the techniques are the same techniques that, say, organized crime use. Because we're both trying to do the same thing. We're trying to do illegal actions without getting caught. Right. And so, tragically, coming out of the Army, if you're a combat arms person, the question is, what jobs can I get? And it ends up being security stuff, which is not very satisfying for someone like us. Mm-hmm. And similarly, if you come out of not just the CIA, most of the CIA is not ops. Ops is a teeny little part of the CIA. But if you come out of CIA ops, the Directorate of Operations, where I was, your skill set is not really suitable for the rest of the world. Like I could have been a narco-terrorist. I had those skills. But yeah. So the other thing to point out is that I would say probably 95, 96% of the techniques that the CIA use are real obvious things. That in the same way that soldiers don't trust fancy technology, because that stuff's going to betray you in the field.
Yes,
The CIA don't trust fancy tradecraft.
that
If
makes
it's too
sense to me.
fancy, it's going to fail you in the field.
100%.
So
And
you
if
want
you're
to keep it
reliant,
simple.
yeah, if you're reliant on that and you're not sufficiently trained on the primitive, retro method, you're in trouble.
Yeah. And it's also true for athletes. When athletes are trying to elevate their game to the next level, they don't work on the fancy stuff. They work on the fundamentals, their footwork, their balance, their center of gravity, their conditioning.
Yes.
That the other stuff just organically emerge once you have that core foundation set. And so CIA training is just like military training or athletic training, where they're going to keep things simple and drill you over and over. And once you can demonstrate that you can like crush the simple stuff, the fancy stuff emerges organically on the fly, improvisationally.
That is fascinating stuff. I don't know if you could ever tell me more offline, but I just want to know so much now. I've never heard about this end. Usually when you talk to somebody that's in CIA, you typically just want to talk about the sexy stuff. And, for me, I think this is really what it's about. It's kind of like understanding the process, what it takes to get hired, what the training is like. That's fascinating to me. Post training, did you stay in Langley or did you go?
Well, so I did a rotation in the agency has subject area divisions and geographical region divisions.
Okay.
And I can't give real details of what I did once I got into truly sensitive stuff. But early on, I was assigned to Alex Station, and Alex Station was the station whose job was to track down Osama bin Laden. Not that was my job.
Right.
I was just working in the counterterrorism center on
With
that
folks.
team.
Okay.
And much of what I did in that job involved interacting with the FBI, because they would have suspects or detainees, and they would just want to know what kind of questions they should be asking these people, that kind of stuff. That I didn't do anything particularly fancy while I was in counterterrorism. And I really don't feel comfortable talking about the fancy stuff I did later.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair. And yeah, I promised you if you came on here, I would not drill down into that. So I won't as much as I want to.
Yeah. Well, the weird thing is when I left, when I resigned.
How many years did you do total?
A decade, 10 years.
Okay.
When I resigned, I was going through it's a couple day process where you have to make sure you sign off on things, and like with the military, they're just kind of dotting every I and crossing every T. And at one point, the person from HR who was processing me said, so did you want to request to have your cover peeled? And I said, is that an option for real? Because for 10 years, I've been living a lie, right? I didn't tell anyone where I worked or what I did.
What does that mean exactly? Have your cover peeled?
That if your cover is peeled, then you are allowed to tell people that you worked at the CIA.
Okay.
And you can go into more detail than that, but like without your cover being peeled, you can never even acknowledge that first part.
Okay.
If you were there undercover.
I'm assuming that if your cover is peeled, your chances of coming back to the CIA are zero.
Not zero, no, because most people who work at the CIA are not undercover at all.
Okay.
And even within operations, a fair number of CMOs, collection management officers, are not undercover. So that would not have necessarily been a block for me to come back. They would not have been excited about that, though, because the qualifications that, in the same sense that you went to Mike Golf School and most tankers never do, this CIA Directorate of Operations has a graduate level program that's the equivalent of Mike Golf School or Buds or
Okay.
something like that. It has a failure rate between 60 and 70% of people fail out. And only a couple percent of people from the director of operations, the DO, even go.
Right.
So you're a rarefied slice of operations who go to this program, and then most of the people who go there wash out. So if you come out the back end of that, then it's called being HETC certified. And if you're HETC certified, they can drop you anywhere in the world to do any mission.
Wow.
It's the highest tier of training that they offer.
Right.
And I was HETC certified, so like HETC certification when you're no longer undercover, you're less useful. And that's one of the reasons why I was sort of flabbergasted. I'm like, I could actually request that. And she said, "Oh, you can request anything, honey. They'll probably just say no, but you can request it. There's no harm in requesting it." I said, "Oh, well, that would make my life easier, right?" And she said, yes, it would, because otherwise you're going to be applying for jobs and they're going to be like checking your history, and the robustness of your cover dramatically reduces once you leave the agency. That while you're in the agency and you're operational, like it's Hollywood levels of cover that anyone poking as hard as they want they're not going to be able to penetrate your cover. But once you leave the organization, then you drop down to a lower tier of cover, and it starts looking hinky to people. So if you can peel back your cover, that's the recommended way to go. So I said, all right, absolutely, I'll request that. And to my amazement, they approved.
Wow.
So officially, it meant that I could acknowledge where I was working for those 10 years. And I did have, like, before I handed a resume over to anybody, I had to send it to the CIA first. They redacted parts that I'm not allowed to admit, and then they sent it back to me.
Wow.
And then I would delete the redacted parts, rewrite the resume, send it back to them again, and they say, "Okay, this is good the way it is." And then that resume I could then hand out.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible.
And I have not, I have written updates to my resume since then, but with each year that passes, I actually delete more of the CIA content than I had before. So I have not added any new details, CIA stuff to my resume since leaving the resume, or since getting it approved, since I left the agency. So I've never bothered to send it back to get it reapproved, because they've already approved the stuff that's on there, the language that's on there.
I understand with the level of secrecy and the, your requirement to protect sources and methods. Is there any stories from any of this period that you can talk about that you feel comfortable talking about that doesn't give away location or anything?
Well, so I can tell you that training is often more exciting than the job.
Okay.
That because in training, you have to be prepared for anything that you might encounter in the field in your assignment. And so the training often, it has to go well beyond what they actually expect you to experience there. So, for example, I mentioned that I was HETC certified.
Right.
As part of that, the final exam for that, it's you against between 100 and 115 FBI surveillance.
Let me pause you real quick.
Sure.
I don't know what my dog is barking at, but I'll be right back.
Yep. Yeah. So in the final exam for HETC, which again is a week-long kind of thing, it's you against over 100 FBI surveillance, and they have access to maybe a dozen vehicles plus a helicopter, or at least this is the way it was back in the day when I was going through training. I'm sure it's different now. And if you can pass that exam, you get the HETC certification. But part of that certification is saying there is no intelligence service in the world that can stop you. Because the FBI, they're not crap at what they do.
Right.
And if they catch you, then you fail. So,
Wow.
So you have to go a week performing your operations without getting caught.
What information are they given about you prior to this operation, this training, this testing beginning?
I don't know, honestly. I can tell you that at least at the time I went through, I had a colleague who went through the running before me, and he was really good, like crazy good, and had all those natural leadership personality traits, right? And in his running, on like day 1 or day 2 of the exam, the instructors gave the FBI his exact location, and they bagged him, threw him in a van, and he spent the rest of the exam in a safe house, being interrogated. And it was because they knew he had passed.
Okay.
Like he had already demonstrated skills. They're like, this guy is going to be fine in the field. What we want to know is the rest of his team. Can they function without him? Because he had been helping people out in the course, as you do. You help each other. It's a collaborative environment. But if they need to see like how other people are doing, you got to take that strong person out and then watch to see what other people do. In my running, sometimes I think they let me do the final exam just because if they had kicked me out, there wouldn't have been a team big enough to do the exam. I mean, we were down to just a couple people at that point. So at any rate, lots of exciting stuff in training.
What does that stand for? What's the acronym stand for?
I'm just going to say Google it. If you can find it out there, then it's okay to be out there.
Too easy.
Yeah. They might not even call it that anymore, for all I know.
Yeah. Well, the government likes to change their acronyms every 5 years.
Right. Yeah. While I was in the agency, like I was hired by the DO, the Director of Operations, but by the time I left, it was called the NCS, the National Clandestine Service, and now it's back to being called the DO. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, whatever. The reason why I throw out training stories is because the real job, if you're doing the job well, there's nothing fun to tell.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I did the things. I got away with it. No one noticed. I'm home. Like,
I've heard that from guys that were hired on to protect folks like you, retired SEALs, retired Army Rangers, whatever. And they always say that if we have to pull a gun or if there's any kind of sketchiness, we've already failed.
Yes.
It should never, ever get to that point. And I get that.
That's also a good point. So if you're a combat arms guy in the military or gal, your job is to take the X and defend the X wherever the X on the map is. And I use X intentionally because that's what indirect fire people do. They like, okay, we've got this location on the grid. We can reliably put ordnance on that spot. So when they're on that spot, you launch. That's the X, and the agency also uses the term in that way. Except the difference is your job is to get off the X anytime you find yourself on it. As soon as you discover the land beneath you is an X, you get the F away. That they do. They train you in all the violent stuff. You know, I trained on explosives and machine guns and Zodiac navigation and jumping out of a moving car and all that kind of stuff. You train on that stuff, but they don't sustain that training, right? If you're a tier 1 operator, let me back up a little bit. At one point, they're training us in a bunch of pretty lethal techniques to use. And I told you that for part of the training, I was partnered up with a SEAL.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're showing us this stuff, and I turned to the SEAL, and I'm like, would this actually work in the real world? Could we do this? He said, you couldn't.
Yeah.
And and, and I said, so why are they teaching us this stuff? And he said, probably for the same reason that we have to wear NBC gear, everyone, go in full mop protection in training.
Right.
It's not like that shit's going to save your life. You're going to die, pretty messily, but but you train on it specifically so that you have confidence that it will
Right.
work, and that allows you to still be functional in the moments right up until you melt. In training, the agency will train you on these really high speed sort of flashy Hollywood kind of things, but they don't sustain it. Like if you were a tier 1 operator, you'd be like training on that every day, because you go 6 weeks without training on it, your skill erodes. You understand the theory, and you could rebuild back up to that skill level in a short period of time, but you're not at that skill level forever. And the CIA does not continuously train people to like maintain that fine edged, or the fine honed edge. And so the trainers didn't tell me that, but my SEAL battle buddy, he's like, yeah.
Well, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
It makes total sense. If you hop in a tank and shoot a tank one time, and then 10, 12 months from now, you have to get on a tank and fire it, you're in trouble.
Right.
Yeah, you have to work on those skills.
Yeah, you understand the theory, but if they want you to actually use it, they will train you on it repeatedly. What they do train you on repeatedly is getting off the X, because that's the skill that they need you to have. They need you to be a ghost the moment the spotlight turns on.
Wow.
And that's total opposite to military training. In military training, like, you are the cannon fodder. Yeah. So if the spotlight's on you, it sucks to be you, but they need you to hold that ground.
Yeah.
And there was even a legal briefing that we received late in the training. This is the basic training stuff that we went through, the farm training, where at the end of that, they bring in lawyers to tell you what you can and cannot get away with, which is pretty important to know because most of the job involves criminal activity. Anytime you leave U.S. soil, the presumption is that you are going to be a criminal until you get back on U.S. soil, and then you will go back to being a law-abiding citizen. That you're not permitted to ever violate U.S. law, but that's why they send officers out of the country, because inside the country we can't do much. We're constrained by the law. Outside the country, like, it's whatever you deem necessary. With the James Bond stuff, they say a 007 is the license, the 00 is the license to kill. All CIA officers that deploy overseas have a license to kill. They don't 00 it. You just get a legal briefing that says, by the way, moving forward, when you deploy, if you decide that people have to die for you to get home alive, we're telling you right now, kill those people, get home alive. And one person said, well, what if they're cops, like in the host country? And the lawyer said, perhaps I stuttered. Wow. You are to kill the people and get home alive. And then they followed up by explaining, but you should know that if you ever have to kill someone in the line of your job, that is a confession that you were not doing your job properly.
Wow.
And you should expect never to be trusted again. That you're not going to jail. They're not going to prosecute you for murder.
Right. But you failed.
Yeah. Your job is to get off the X, not to become a soldier. You're not an assassin. You're a spy. And it's a different, like, there are different rules of engagement that you are allowed to break whatever rule of engagement you deem necessary in the moment, but you have to understand that there's weight behind that, and it's a confession that whatever techniques you use, they're in a certain category. And if you're downshifting from the category you're supposed to be in to a different category, they respect that choice, but you're going to be under heavy scrutiny for, did you have any other options? And the presumption is that you must have had another option. So it takes a lot of work for them to figure out, okay, this person didn't actually have any other options. And that was something that we had to learn the hard way in places like Afghanistan, where a lot of CIA officers were having to train Northern Alliance people to do things. And, well, sometimes that meant local baddies knew that you were CIA.
Yes.
And you were always on the X. You never got off it. There was an incident in Islamabad, if I'm not mistaken, where a special activities division guy, which is another part of the CIA, and it's where most like tier 1 operators end up going. If you're a SEAL and you get into the DO, the director of operations, odds are good special activities division is going to ask to have you, and they will get you. These guys, they go into essentially war zones where we still need to collect intel, and they do the CIA job on a battlefield. And the rules are going to be very different. When those guys end up having to kill people, yes, they still have to explain it. There was a guy that he was driving in, I think it was Islamabad, and he was in a traffic jam, and so he couldn't move his vehicle. And all of a sudden, a whole bunch of terrorists just kind of came out and started shooting up his vehicle. And all he had was a pistol. And I think he managed to kill 4 or 5 of them, and he got away.
Wow.
And I assume that he was pulled from that assignment, spent months having to explain exactly how he found himself in a situation where people could identify him and attack him. But I'm also guessing that at the end, they're like, okay, well, you're special activities division and you were in a war zone, essential.
Yes.
Not that we were at war with Pakistan at the time, but
no, but still, yeah.
But I don't know. All I know is, when I see the news of an event like that, I'm reading between the lines. So the news is not saying this was a CIA officer, but you can tell.
Sure.
Like, who else working for the U.S. government would be armed with only a pistol?
Right. In the middle of Islamabad. Would
be able to take out half a dozen terrorists who attacked him, who ambushed him.
Right.
And get away alive. Like, that's a tier 1 operator. That's not someone like me.
Right.
Because he already told me, yeah, I would just die. That's what I would do. And I believe him. So, it makes reading the news a different animal once you've been on the other side. Like with the Wizard of Oz, when that curtain gets pulled back. Well, if you get to go behind the curtain and see all the levers that operate and what they do for the wizard, it's a different universe. Even when the curtain gets drawn again, you still see movement of the curtain. You know what's going on the other side. So reading the news is just it's different.
I believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. I'm so glad that you had that experience. I'm so glad that you made it out relatively unscathed at the end of it. So I know we're up against a hard time, but I want to move into what you're doing now.
Okay.
I know you worked, I think this was before your tenure with the CIA. You worked with my mom as a teacher. And then what led you back to teaching after the CIA? Was that what you went into directly out of the CIA, or?
It kind of is. Yeah. So, keep in mind that before I went in the Army, I was planning to become an anthropologist.
Right.
I was going to be a teacher, teaching anthropology. That's that career track, at least in my mind. And so, teaching and pedagogy, always my first love. When the reason why I left the CIA, because I loved that job. That
Mm-hmm.
was just hands down the most incredible job ever.
Were you weren't married at this point, right?
I was, and
You were married.
that was a big part of why I left.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, I met my wife while I was about to go into Hetzi training. And so our courtship was at a time when I was under so much stress that I lost 23 pounds. And this won't mean anything to your other listeners because they don't know who I weighed the same coming out of that Hetzi course as I did when I was 14 years old and 2 inches shorter.
Yeah, you were never a big guy, man.
Yeah, I had a 24-inch waist coming out of Hetzi training.
Wow.
But I could run like the wind for miles.
I believe it.
Yeah, that's the best shape I've ever been in my life. Not recommended to court someone while you're under that kind of stress.
Yeah.
Not very smart, but it worked out. We got married.
Yeah.
We have 2 wonderful kids. But while we were overseas, we were looking at other families that were farther ahead than we were in terms of family raising. And their kids were all wonderful people, incredibly well-educated, worldly, multilingual, amazing people. But all of them saw the United States as a vacation spot, not as home.
Interesting.
Because they didn't grow up there.
Okay.
It's a place they go on holidays. And I'm like, that is tragically sad. Like I enlisted in the Army and joined the CIA because I love being American.
Mm-hmm.
I think America's got it going on and should do good things. So the idea of raising kids that would be kind of indifferent to America as a democratic experiment,
Mm-hmm.
like that just hurt my heart. And then what really drove the nail in, our first child was born while we were overseas, and we were living in a very polluted city, as many cities around the world are. The US EPA estimated that breathing that city air was the equivalent of smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day.
Wow.
And if I had told someone, hey, I forced my infant to hotbox 2 packs of cigarettes a day,
Yeah.
like Child Protective Services would be there, and I'd no longer be a parent. You know?
I'm gonna assume this is somewhere in Asia.
We won't go there. But it's definitely a polluted city, and I felt terrible as a father. It was one thing for me to ask my wife to join me in a place where she was going to be spending time essentially smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day and
Mm-hmm.
loading up on that cancer risk. But an infant, who does that to a baby? I could not escape that guilt. And so from that point forward, I was like, you're going to have to rotate me back to the States after this. And 3 years later, I had to resign altogether. That I just, yeah.
You did it for a very noble reason.
Well, I think people do it for whatever, like for the reason that my new administrator, he calls it doing your heart work, that things that your heart is really prioritizing, that's your heart work. And as a parent, like for most of us, if we're lucky, parenting is our heart work. It is the priority, and it's the most rewarding activity we're going to do.
Yeah.
And it's hard to feel good about like ditching out on that responsibility to do something else. So even though I felt the work I was doing was important and it was exciting as hell, I had multiple opportunities to meet U.S. presidents. I've challenged coins from people like the Director of National Intelligence and uh, various area commands, that you're like at this weird level of seeing the machinations of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so addictive
I
that
bet.
you never want to leave that viewpoint and go into ignorance again. But I couldn't make the choice as a parent to tell my infant daughter, "Suck it up, Daddy's got to go to work." You
Yeah.
know, that didn't play out for me. So, yeah.
Wow.
I have tons of respect for people who were able to do a full career. I was not going to be that guy.
Yeah. Well, do you get anything for the 10 years of service, or is it just a shake on the hand and an attaboy? And
Well, so everything that I got for my service is in a lockbox somewhere. I'll never see it.
okay.
Um,
So nothing towards a pension or anything like that?
well, no, I do have retirement stuff like that. In fact, that actually rolled into my state retirement.
Perfect.
Because I'm still a government employee, just of a school instead of the CIA.
Now, you weren't initially in IT, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I recall we met a few years ago over a beer, and I want to say that were you teaching drama and some other things
I
at
was
the
teaching
time?
engineering and stagecraft.
Engineering and stagecraft.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So why the shift to IT?
While I like in my third year of teaching engineering, we had a superintendent come in to our department, and she told us that the University of Cincinnati was partnering with our school to launch something called the Early IT program. And the Early IT program was a pathway to get kids to consider IT careers, and specifically to kind of fast track them into UC's Bachelor of Science in IT program.
Okay.
Because the demand in the economy was and is massive, and the supply is a trickle, relatively. This was the opposite of the anthropology thing, where universities were cranking all kinds of anthropologists, not very many jobs, but only a few IT people and tons of IT jobs. So most IT jobs globally are filled by people who are self-taught rather than people who learned it at college or grad school or whatever.
Let me insert something real quick while
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it. I'm friends with a IT headhunter for government contract work. So if you have any students that come back if they've moved on to UC and are coming out looking for a job, look me up. This guy's always looking for guys right out of school, guys and gals right out of school, and starts them off 6 figures. So, yeah, just keep that in the back of your head. But go ahead.
Will do. Yeah. So once she said, "Hey, UC wants to partner with us on this," I said, "Oh, can you put my name on the list?" And she's like, "It's nice that you would say that, because I was bringing it up hoping that one of you would step up and volunteer, because we don't know how to hire someone for this. It's not a position that existed." So UC then put me through 18 graduate credit hours of IT training, at the end of which they certified me to teach the undergraduate level, the freshman year of IT coursework, to teenagers, to high schoolers. But they're eligible for full UC transcripts for the classes they take with me.
That's fantastic. Now, I told you before we started this, and we only got a few minutes left. So, first off, I want to get you back on here again. You're just a fascinating guy, and I can't believe you were kind of hemming and hawing about, "Oh, I don't really have a story to tell."
Well, everyone has a story to tell, Jeremy. It's just like, I've been listening to your podcast. I'm like, I don't fit in.
No, you do a lot more than you might think. Well, I want to go back to a conversation that you and I had years ago.
Okay.
We were talking about hegemony. We're talking about the United States being the hegemonic superpower of the 20th century
Yeah.
and the early 21st so far. And just what we were talking about was what would the next hegemonic power look like, and what would propel them into that position. And you came back quickly, and you're like, it's going to be one of two things or both. Which nation secures the ability to funnel energy in a way that is sustainable, renewable, and corner that market? And then the other one was whoever was to reach that level of AI first. And I don't know if we're talking about AGI.
AGI, yeah.
Yeah. So whoever was to reach AGI first is most likely going to be the next superpower. Now, of course, if you look at a snapshot of the world right now, it appears, I may be wrong, it appears that China and the United States are in the forefront of that and seem to be very close to reaching that AGI. What are your thoughts about AI? What are your thoughts about America versus China? Where are we looking? Do you still stand by those 2 points as being what you think would set?
I'm leaning more. Well, so it looks like we'll probably get AGI before we have the cheap sustainable energy.
Mhm.
So I'm leaning more that AGI is going to determine that hegemonic force. But I no longer think the U.S. has an option to be one of those. I do think China legitimately could be that hegemonic presence. But in the U.S., the government doesn't control AI development.
Right.
It's corporate. It's privatized. So it's possible that someone like OpenAI or Anthropic or Microsoft or Google could become that hegemonic force as a private entity.
Interesting.
And I have no clue what that would look like.
It looks like the beginning of Terminator.
Skynet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So always be polite to ChatGPT, friends.
Yeah, no kidding. But we could do hours just on that alone, because I know you are armed with a ton of knowledge on that subject. But I'm gonna respect your hard time. I know you got things to do. But this has been fantastic, Mike. I appreciate you coming on here. I almost called you Sully because that's what we called you back in the Army.
That's what my students call me now.
Sully?
Yeah.
Excellent. That's perfect. I don't remember who it was that first gave you that moniker, but it immediately took off. It immediately was like, yeah, that's Sully.
Yeah. Well, it's also my brother's nickname where he works, and it's my sister's nickname where she works.
It's just a part and parcel of being a Sullivan.
Yeah.
Good deal. Well, I wish nothing but the best for you and your family, and thank you so much for sitting down with me. And let's get together soon and have dinner, man.
Yeah. I would definitely like that. One of the reasons why I listen to your podcast is I miss your voice.
I appreciate it, man, but yours is way better. You should be doing this.
Although I do think you should let someone interview you at some point.
I keep getting that. People keep saying that to me.
It's an obvious thing. Maybe the next time you and I are on microphone, we'll turn the tables.
We'll see. We'll talk about that. Maybe. I don't know. I want this to be about the guests and not about me at all.
I hear you, but at the same time, if the audience doesn't really know the host, like that kind of stuff matters. And you do sprinkle in little bits here and there.
Yeah.
But that's different from giving someone like the full thing.
True. I'll think about it. I'll consider it. I appreciate it. I was even going to keep this on audio only because I didn't even want people to know what I look like. I just wanted to be anonymous.
Yeah.
And talk to folks, about life, get to know people. So, but you've been fantastic. This has been great, man. I really appreciate you. And like I said, I'd touch base with you. I don't think anything needs to be edited out. Anything in your CIA time?
No.
Yeah.
I didn't go into any real details.
All right. Well, I will process this, and it's going to be out there for people to listen to shortly.
All right.
Thanks, Sully. Appreciate you, man.
Anytime.
Take care, brother.